So I'm going to share screen or?
No, you're going to make Jennifer the host. So look,
Okay, hold on. Yeah, I see it now.
Jennifer's
Make
under
them-
Coastal and Heartland.
Okay, change host. Yes.
Okay, you did it.
Jen, you all right there?
I am, thank you.
Okay.
All right, can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Great,
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting us to speak to you tonight. It's a great honor, and we very much appreciate this opportunity to talk about what the Coastal and Heartland National Estuary Partnership is and what we're doing to protect Pine Island's water and wildlife. So just a little bit about us, for those of you who are not familiar with the CHNEP as we're otherwise known. We were formed back in 1995 as one of the congressionally designated estuaries of national significance in the United States. And as a result of that designation, we were folded into the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's National Estuary Program. As you can see on this map, we're one of 4 National Estuary Program organizations in Florida and one of 28 in the United States. As such, we receive special funding and support from the US EPA under the Clean Water Act to protect and restore water resources in this area. Our service area is outlined here. It encompasses over 5,400 square miles and includes 10 counties and 25 plus cities. It includes the estuaries of Lemon and Dona and Roberts Bays in Sarasota County, Charlotte Harbor, in Charlotte County, and Pine Island Sound, CALOOSAHATCHEE, San Carlos, and Estero Bays in Lee County. And the major rivers are the MATLACHA, Peace, CALOOSAHATCHEE, and Estero that are within our service area. The CHNEP really exemplifies the power of partnerships. We're a public-private partnership that is science and consensus-based, non-regulatory, and citizen-supported. Because of the private contributions, volunteers, and donated in-kind services we receive, we're able to provide $19 worth of restoration for every federal dollar we receive. And so what we work on is what we call the Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan, the CCMP. This is a plan that was collectively drafted by all of the partners in the partnership. And it has 4 priority action areas, which we're going to touch on briefly. One having to do with water quality improvement, hydrological restoration, fish, wildlife, and habitat protection, and public engagement. With regards to water quality, I'm just going to dive right in and talk about some of the big issues that we're dealing with right now that are widespread issues throughout the entire region. One has to do with nutrient pollution. So nutrient pollution is excess nitrogen and phosphorus. The sources of nutrient pollution can come from agricultural, stormwater, or wastewater runoff. And nutrient pollution can contribute to harmful algae blooms or lower dissolved oxygen that can result in aquatic life die-off and fish kills. So it's a big concern in our area. Just zeroing in on some of the major contributing factors, we do have an issue in some places with failing septics, where septics, that older systems that were improperly constructed, placed, or maintained can leach these nutrients and bacteria into groundwater and indirectly into surface waters. Florida has a very high water table and sandy soils that allows wastewater to move quickly through the groundwater. So we have to be very thoughtful on how we deal with septics in Florida. And if we don't take care of them and we don't place them properly, they can cause water quality issues. Even where they are placed, they need to be properly maintained. Right here in this map, you can see a map of different wastewater facilities throughout Lee County, including on Pine Island, and you'll notice that the greens are septics. So you can see that we do have quite a bit of septics systems in Lee County, including in areas that are in relatively close proximity to waterways. So kind of looking directly at the water quality in Pine Island Sound. Pine Island Sound is a Class 2 water body, meaning it's designated for shellfish propagation and harvesting. that are use. These are water body segments where the water quality is not sufficient to protect that designated use. So you can see some areas of Pine Island Sound right now are considered impaired or not meeting water quality standards routinely for fecal coliform bacteria and also for mercury, which is a pretty common issue in Florida. Also looking at the nutrients, particularly nitrogen, which is the nutrient of concern in the estuarine areas. You can see here a graph of nitrogen where you see it slowly creeping up ever so slightly. Right now, Pine Island's not impaired for nutrients, but you do see that there is a slight uptick in nutrient levels. As far as water quality in MATLACHA Pass, it is also a class 2 water body, and these are the impairments in MATLACHA Pass. Nutrients are an issue there. The total nitrogen levels are above those considered safe for that designated use, as is bacteria and mercury. I'll say mercury, it was delisted, but that does not mean that mercury is not an issue. It's just basically in Florida, Florida decided that a lot of our mercury is atmospheric coming from power plants outside of our state. And so they generally have basically delisted water bodies because they see it as something outside of their control. And then we have the nutrient levels in MATLACHA Pass. The top graph here is nitrogen and the bottom is phosphorus. And you can see there are some fluctuations over time, but also just ever so slight upticks in nutrients in MATLACHA Pass. So kind of zooming out from that, I'm going to talk about a couple of things the CHNEP is directly doing to try to address these issues. Number one, the CHNEP funds over $90,000 annually to fund something called this Coastal Charlotte Harbor Monitoring Network, which is monthly water quality sampling, and it includes the Pine Island Sound. So you can see this map on the right. Those are all the areas that we're funding water quality sampling in.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this sampling is important to improve our understanding of where we have problems and where and how we need to allocate resources to improve water quality. And this informs decision makers as to what we can be doing to improve our water quality. Another thing we're doing annually is funding over $50,000 a year for the maintenance of what's known as the CHNEP Water Atlas. So not only are we doing sampling, but a number of other entities are doing sampling of water quality. So we're trying to put it all in one centralized public website called the CHNEP Water Atlas. And with that data, we also put analytical tools that allow us to assess that data and interpret that data to understand if water quality conditions are improving or declining. We are right now expanding this site and updating it. So we're going to make it more and more user friendly, but it is still a useful resource right now. It's a little technical, but I encourage you to check it out. If you just Google CHNEP Water Atlas, you'll be able to find it. And then we're directly undertaking restoration. So in the Tidal CALOOSAHATCHEE, we funded a significant amount of money, $14,000 or so, towards buying seagrass to replant. And we organized a volunteer project with volunteers, got permits, and actually physically replanted seagrass where it's been lost in the Tidal CALOOSAHATCHEE, because the seed source, the seagrass is so depleted now in that area. It's essentially gone. There wasn't the seed source for it to even regenerate. So we actually physically planted plants to restore the seed source. And we did have the first documented case of flowering seagrass, reproductive seagrass in that portion of the river in over a decade as a result of this project. So we were very excited about it. Seagrass is important not only because it's the base of our food chain, but it helps to improve water quality. It naturally uptakes nutrients. And that in turn can help reduce harmful algae blooms and create better habitat for our aquatic life, including endangered species like the manatee. Another project that we're currently funding is the CHNP is currently funding is research, basically trying to quantify the nutrient removal benefits of seagrass. We know it uptakes nutrients, but in order for municipalities who are doing seagrass restoration to get credit in the state regulatory system, there has to be scientific research that determines how much nutrients these seagrasses are uptaking. So we are funding the FGC Water School $45,000 to do a research project to quantify those benefits. Another project we're going to be funding this year right on Pine Island is the Pine Island Flatwoods Preserve Wetland Habitat Enhancement Project. The Pine Island Flatwoods Preserve is part of the Lee County Conservation 2020 program. It's a 919-acre passive area. We're going to be going in and doing work to do physical restoration of the site. And we are investing $86,000 this coming year to doing that project. And another thing that we do, and besides the research and the restoration that you've already been seeing, is we are trying to inform decision makers. So one of the important things we hear from policymakers is that they need to understand the cost benefit and the return on investment of these projects, because they are very costly investments to make. So we undertook a 2-year study with a team of economists to quantify the economic benefits associated with natural resource restoration and protection in the CHNEP area. And for the entire area, it was 13.6 billion in total economic output, 3.8 billion in regional income, 146 million in local and state tax revenues, and 148,000 jobs. And then we actually broke it up by county and also by basin. So right here, you'll see the yellow star around Pine Island area in Sanibel. That's the Pine Island Sound Basin. It is approximately 18% of Lee County. The primary economic drivers is number 1, tourism, as well as commercial fishing, agriculture. And in this particular basin, the economic benefits were 1.35 billion a year in economic benefits, with 1.46 billion in property value premiums, 3.8 million in agriculture production, and 1.39 billion in recreational spending. So big numbers to talk about how much our natural resources are directly supporting our economic activity in the area. So we give that information. We've sent that to all elected leaders at the local, state, and federal level. And we are encouraging them to see the return on investment and inversely, what is at stake to be potentially lost if we continue to see natural resources decline, water quality decline in the region. What would be the potential economic impact of that? So this is hopefully a motivator to them to undertake those necessary investments to upgrade our wastewater infrastructure, improve our stormwater management, and do other things that can reduce pollutants entering our waterways. And then we're not just about aquatic resources, but also terrestrial resources and habitat for wildlife. So on that side of it, we undertook a large study with experts to create a master habitat restoration needs plan, which takes all of the existing habitat restoration plans and puts them together, and then uses cutting edge climate science to look at sea level rise and where there'll be natural habitat migration or movement of habitat in response to sea level rise. And we use that to then create a regional vision map of what is needed to preserve essential habitats now and into the future for our native wildlife. So when you look at this map in its totality, I'll just really quickly explain that the blue areas are private lands that have significant habitat value. So that we call those our preservation conservation opportunity areas. So we would like land programs who are looking to buy land or buy conservation easements on private lands to focus on securing these areas to prevent intensification of use. And then the green areas are public areas already publicly owned. So you can see when the blue and the green are put together that they identify these key habitat corridors and contiguous habitat areas that are needed to sustain our native wildlife. And zooming in on the Pine Island MATLACHA Basin, again, you see the blue areas that are privately owned areas that are very important for wildlife. And then you see the green areas that are publicly owned areas. And then the pink areas are public owned areas that are non-natural, that we're not suggesting have to be restored, but we want to prevent intensification of use. So let's say there was a ball field in a very low-lying area that's going to be continually flooded. We've identified those areas that are extremely flood prone due to sea level rise as those pink areas, the reservation opportunity areas, where we would want to reserve those areas from development to make sure that they are compatible with what is going to ensue with sea level rise. And so another thing that folded into this is doing really sophisticated modeling to look at sea level rise impacts in this basin. And this is actually in another report. All these reports are available on our website, so you can take a deep dive if you have an interest. But basically, we used a commonly accepted sea level rise model to look specifically at these different basins. And right here on the left, you see 2016. The red areas are mangroves. And then in 2070, on the right-hand side, you see again the same colors, the red being the mangroves. So obviously, in this case, with sea level rise, there's going to be areas that become too deep for mangroves. So we will see a loss of mangroves in some of these areas. So this is all what goes into us planning, understanding what we're already experiencing. We've already had several inches of rise over the past few decades. We anticipate more than that level going forward. But this is a relatively conservative analysis of what is predicted for 2070. And it shows the different vegetative communities there. And then the orange are undeveloped uplands, and the gray and the black are developed areas. So in closing, I just wanted to say that, you know, there's a lot that we're trying to do and that we encourage others to be doing. And basically, we're all part of the problem, so we all need to be part of the solution. Our job is to try to bring people together, including citizens, to address these issues. We are at the CHNEP working with agencies, local governments, and NGOs to try to work on all different levels: monitoring and reporting, research, restoration, education, funding of projects, legislation. But of course, there's things individuals can do, you know, planting Florida-friendly plants, using fertilizer correctly or as little as possible, helping to support local governments who are looking to try to do septic to sewer conversion to try to reduce the amount of septics, and upgrade wastewater treatment so that it has more storage and treatment capacity, especially with increased storms and severity of storms. That's becoming a big issue. I'm sure you've heard recently about the spills that had occurred around Fort Myers. So wastewater infrastructure is in many places aging out and becoming a bigger and bigger problem with contributing nutrients and bacteria into our waterways. For more information, and I'm happy to stick around as long as you guys want to talk and ask questions or whatever, discuss this. But if you do want more information after today, feel free to go on our website. It's just chnep.org. We have a subscribe button in the upper right-hand corner where you can subscribe for a free Harbor Happenings magazine and our annual CHNEP Nature Calendar. Those are free. They're mailed right to your home. Great way to stay in the loop about what's going on with the CHNEP and ways you can be involved. We also have our plan, our CCMP master plan, which is an amazing resource and reference about all the different things that need to happen to better steward our water and wildlife resources. And then these specific reports that we just presented on the habitat restoration needs, the economic valuation study, all those are also available on our website. So very much, again, appreciate this opportunity to share our work with you and answer any questions you have.
I have one for Jennifer.
Mhm.
Okay. First of all, it's a pleasure getting to know you. I was on the Civilian Advisory Committee with CHNEP about 10 years ago. And,
Oh, great.
yeah, the travel killed me, but I learned a lot. I don't know if you're aware of it, but on Pine Island, we don't have a wastewater infrastructure. Our wastewater treatment plant pretty much exclusively treats the water from MATLACHA. Everybody else is, with a few exceptions, are on their own. Do you guys do any studies to show how problematical that could be? Because I'm sure we're leaching a lot of sewage directly in the Pine Island Sound and MATLACHA Pass.
Yes, we have worked with different local governments. And for instance, in Charlotte County, we completed a septic study. In fact, today I was on the phone with Dr. Brian LaPointe. He is considered the foremost expert on septics, and he, is interested in continuing to expand his work. Right now, I believe he's working with Lee County on doing a Lee County study to specifically look at septics and their contribution. We also have been talking with a gentleman at USF who's looking at reclaimed water. I'm sure you all are familiar. Reclaimed water is treated wastewater that is used for irrigation. The problem is in some case, it's not treated to the standards of, our waterways, that you would not, the nutrients aren't fully removed. And when it is sprayed out close to waterways, it can also run into waterways and contribute nutrients. So there's a gentleman at USF who has done studies up near St. Pete about that issue. And then we're trying to look for somebody who's an expert on wastewater spills and the contribution and impacts associated with wastewater spills. We know of real life examples where that has been evidenced. I mean, Sarasota, if you're not familiar, they had a huge sewage spill that, well, it wasn't really even a sewage spill. I wouldn't classify it as that. It was not properly treated wastewater that was allowed to be released over time. And the community thought that that plant was operating at advanced wastewater treatment standards, but the seagrass started to die off, and the water keeper up there investigated and found out that the plant had reversed to downgrade its treatment. And as a result, that very nutrient heavy water had been going out into the bay and smothering seagrasses. And so we're seeing problems with algae growth, and nutrients can contribute to the overgrowth of the algae. And those algae in turn can block light or smother seagrass, which is, a very important resource in our area. So I'm sorry if that's a long-winded way to say that. Basically, we're still learning a lot. We know some things, but there's more to be learned, and we're funding that research. We're trying to always figure out who's doing what and to fill those gaps. That's where the CHNEP comes in, as we're the convener, but we're also the person who looks at, well, what's not getting done, and then we go in and find the funding and do the things that aren't getting done.
I have a question.
Yes.
Thanks, Jennifer. It's good seeing you again. Appreciate it. Outstanding presentation, and we appreciate you sharing that information with us. We've been hearing a lot lately about the legislatures putting funding in for retrofitting certain sewer systems that are problematic systems. We have some problematic systems here on the island, and we were wondering, is there an opportunity to form a partnership with your agency to we could jointly file for a grant to solve some of the septic problems we have on the island?
We are always willing to write letters of support. And in fact, we write several every month for different people applying for these grants, because we are a US EPA program. We have this plan. You guys are in an estuary of national significance area with an approved comprehensive conservation and management plan. Those are things that boost your potential ability to get funding. So we are always happy to write letters of support to highlight that. I will say the state revolving fund for wastewater improvements is pretty limited, and what we're finding is like every single city and county now is having serious wastewater infrastructure issues. And so there's a big amount of need and a very small amount of resource. So it's become very competitive. This issue though, all of our meetings are public. So depending on how much you have an interest in this thing, you can go on our website and it talks about us, and it has a list of our upcoming meetings. And you can even sign up to get notices about those meetings. But we bring in the top experts. And this next go around, we're bringing in all wastewater experts to talk to our management committee, which is natural resource managers, and our policy committee, which are all elected leaders. So we're doing our best to educate them with the best science, and then also show them resources that exist, and then support them as we can. We don't ourselves get enough funding to make a huge dent, and these projects are so expensive. Our total funding wouldn't even fund but a smidge of one of those projects. But we certainly do everything in our power to support those applications. So yes, if you all are interested in pursuing that, feel free to follow up with us on it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jennifer, I have a question. The question I have is, we can do a lot ourselves with fertilizer and septic and things like that, but could you help us understand the mix of Lake Okoboji discharge percentage versus septic versus our fertilizer? Because some of us are very in tune with what's going on with Lake Okoboji and the discharges and with the nitrogen and phosphorus coming from there. I don't know what you have found as far as the percentages of one versus another versus another.
Yes, actually, on our web pages right now for our management and policy committee pages, I can't remember which one or the other, there is actually videos on that subject, because that was the topic of our last cycle of meetings.
Okay.
So we had a presenter talk about the lake discharges and what's being done on that side of things. And we had researchers talk about the basin runoff, what's coming from the actual CALOOSAHATCHEE basin directly into the river. And roughly it's around half and half. Okay. So about half of the nutrients is coming from the lake and half is coming from the basin itself.
Okay.
So it's a combination of dealing with both of those things. And then in the basin, of course, you have some of it coming from stormwater, some of it, which would fertilizer, for instance, typically would come through stormwater, wastewater, and then agriculture runoff. So it's a variety of sources, both that feed into the lake, which come downstream from the lake to us, and then directly from our own basin into the river and estuary.
I'll go to the website. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah, I have a question as well, and it's related to all of these other questions that have been talked about. We know that you have a group of volunteers who collect water quality information, and you also have on your staff a number of modelers who are looking at the overall flow of the nutrients and so forth. Now, as you said, the wastewater issue is too big for the amount of money that we have available. But if we could prioritize in some way, if we were able to study so that we knew what were the crucial areas, what was creating particular problems on the island, we could focus on those. So I mean, given the fact that you have these water quality people collecting samples, and that you have some of the knowledgeable people about modeling it. Is there a possibility of arranging some help so that we can identify on the island, do the kind of studies that we need to identify what are our biggest problems, and so that we can focus on those?
So the state, normally what should happen is once the water body is determined to be impaired, you're supposed to then, the state is supposed to do what's called a TMDL, a total maximum daily load, where they determine what the pollutant limit should be for that particular waterway or water body. And in doing that, then they would develop something called a basin management action plan, cleanup plan, which actually studies how much is coming from what each respective thing and how much does each need to reduce to meet that overall limit, that TMDL pollution limit. The problem is the state there's so many impaired waters now that they're not doing TMDLs, they're not setting these pollutant limits and developing these cleanup plans in a timely manner anymore. So this, and so people are saying, well, we want to do it ourselves, but the problem is it's extremely difficult and expensive. It's much more complicated than it sounds, because once the nutrients are in the waterway, it's very hard to determine how those nutrients got there. There's a lot of, it's very backwards right now, but we don't have water quality standards upstream in a lot of our flowing waters and our tidal creeks. So it all is allowed to essentially go down into the estuary. And then when the estuary is declining, then they deal with it. But by then you can't tell where it came from and what the problems are. Our water quality sampling, as you probably saw on that map, are focused more in the estuary area because that's where the water quality standards are. Without going on and on, there was efforts to get standards upstream, and the state of Florida fought EPA successfully to prevent standards from being applied to upstream waters, which then makes it much more difficult to hold polluters accountable and to pinpoint where this pollution is coming from. And then, and then the studies to try to back trace that are just very expensive and difficult. So that's why you don't see more of them. And the state is supposed to do them, but they're stretched too thin at this point to be able, there's too many water bodies needing those types of studies. And our area has been lower priority for getting state resources to do those studies. So,
yeah,
I don't mean to sound like a Debbie Downer, but we try to push for that. We have a letter on our website where we ask the state to do exactly what you're talking about. And they never responded, and we followed up over and over again, and we were never able to get them to move forward with developing these pollutant limits and cleanup plans for impaired waters that we felt were high priority in our area.
So my question is something more specific than the total daily maximum load issue. And I don't know if you're aware, but we are outside of the Basin Management Action Plan. We fall down below it.
Right.
So that the issue that I would like to have us do is get some understanding of what are the local problems that we're experiencing. But we would need help to do that. And I'm thinking of you rather than going to the state. I mean, rather than you referring best up to the state level. So some of the resources that you have there, if we found the right volunteers here, we might conduct such a study ourselves, but we would need your help.
Well, we can certainly talk with you all further about that. There is an alternative thing called a reasonable assurance study, and it can be community driven. The problem again is that the state doesn't really provide any resources, and we're talking probably more than my total annual budget to try to undertake something like this the way that it would need to be done for the state to accept it. And you would want the state to accept it because otherwise it doesn't get implemented the way it should be. You know, if the state doesn't accept your pollutant limit or cleanup plan, then you don't get changes in permits that are being issued in your area. So anyway, long story short is we can certainly continue the conversation on that, but it really is better, I think, in the long run also for citizens to be aware of this and to push the state and say, this is a concern for us and we want you to come down and do these studies to determine what the right pollution limit is and what cleanup plan is needed to get our waters to be safe again. That's really what I'm trying to do, is encourage you to, you know, it is the state's responsibility to do it, and they should.
Okay,
Thanks.
we're
I
going,
have,
we're
I
gonna,
have a quick question.
yeah, if it's real quick, yeah.
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 If you are on the Flatwoods Preserve action project you're going to do, if and when you can use volunteers, if you could let us know, I think we might be able to get some manpower.
Sure.
Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. However, at this point, what we're constructing is doing heavy construction. We're going to be regrading the site to remove historical shrimp ponds and berms to try to make it more natural again. So it's not at the point where we would have volunteers go out and plant plants. It's going to be the heavy duty earthwork.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
thank you, and we'll be in touch, no question.
All
We're
right. Like us on Facebook too. Like us on Facebook.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,